Hey YouTube, Team Yu-Gi-Oh! Ohio here, bringing you a budget Swordsoul deck profile. So with the recent release of the Magnificent Mavens booster set, as well as the success of Master Duel, there have been a lot of new players trying to get into the physical trading card game, and we believe that Swordsoul is a very good deck to start with because every single card in this deck has been reprinted in either Magnificent Mavens or in an earlier reprint set like Ghost from the Past 2. So the deck is very inexpensive, very affordable. Almost every card in this deck is under $1, with most of them being only quarters. And it's a very competent deck that you can easily make competitive if you swap out some of the card choices. We will be keeping a running counter of how much the deck costs on the screen. And these values will be pulled straight from TCGPlayer, lowest near mint, sold by a gold star or verified seller. So if you're watching this in the future, the values could change, but hopefully this deck will remain relatively affordable even far into the future. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll start with the Swordsoul core of the deck. So we have triple Moye, double Taya, triple Long Yuan, and then the honorary Swordsoul monster Incredible Ecclesia, as well as triple Emergence, one Sacred Summit, and one Blackout. So this is your main Swordsoul core. Everything in here was reprinted in Magnificent Mavens, so very easy to pick up. If you ask around at your locals or local card shop, they very likely will have these cards. And your primary playmakers are Moyi, Taya, Ecclesia, and Emergence. Emergence is tutors for them. And usually, if you look up deck profiles of Swordsoul tops within like the last year, it's probably pretty rare for them to play Sacred Summit. Sacred Summit is a good card that if you weren't on a budget, you probably wouldn't play just because you have better options. But since we are on a budget, Sacred Summit is a good one-of to just search out with your Chi-Chao, and that kind of lets you extend more and have more options, which is something that a budget deck profile could really need. But that's it for the Swordsoul core of the deck. Let's go ahead and move on to the Tenyi part of the deck. So the Tenyis have super good synergy because they're all worms, and we run 3 Adhara, 3 Vishuddha, 3 Ashina, 1 Shatana, and then 3 Heavenly Dragon Circle. So the Tenyis can be extenders for you, they can be starters for you, and Heavenly Dragon Circle in particular is extremely good for dodging hand traps, making sure that your plays go through, and also giving you additional plays on the following turn. And this engine is very critical in letting you play through boards going second, since the Swordsoul part of the deck is very susceptible to interruption. So you really need these cards so that when you lose the die roll, you have a very good chance of breaking your opponent's board and continuing your plays. So now we get to the non-engine part of the deck, and the card choices here are subjective, so you can swap them out with whatever you have on hand. What I've put in here, for the sake of the budget, we have 3 Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, 2 Pot of Desires, 1 Called by the Grave, 2 Cosmic Cyclone, as well as 3 Rivalry Warlords. So if you have cards on hand already, like say you have Infinite Impermanence, you have Dark Ruler No Mores, stuff like that, you can change these non-engine cards based on what your local plays. I would always keep 2 Pot of Desires and Called by the Grave in, however, because with you running so many 3-ofs in your deck, Pot of Desires will almost never banish every single copy of a card. So you have very little downside to playing this card, and it just gives you a free draw too. Called by the Grave is also just a very powerful card. It's so flexible in dealing with any kind of graveyard effect or with your opponent's hand traps should they try to stop you. So these 3 I would at least always keep in. But as for the rest of these, it's really just up to what you want and how you want to combat your local meta. I personally like Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, not only because it's extremely affordable right now, but also one of the most popular hand traps in the current meta are the Bestial monsters, which banish a Light Lord Doctor from the grave to special summon themselves. So Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion you can use it to disrupt your opponent, but you can also use it to protect yourself from the Bestials, because your Tenyis are Darks and Lights. So Ghost Bow is a good offensive and defensive option. As for these last 5 cards, Rivalry of Warlords is a very strong option in Swordsoul because, as you probably have figured out, the entire deck runs worm monsters, except for Incredible Ecclesia, which is Spellcaster. So you will have to kind of do your plays with that in mind, because you don't want to accidentally lock yourself out of an Ecclesia if that's your only follow-up play. But otherwise, Rivalry is extremely powerful against most decks in the meta, and it's something that if your opponent doesn't have a baked-in way to remove it, it could just single-handedly win you the game. Cosmic Cyclone is here just a generic spell trap removal options. Since the last ban list put Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos to 3, if you're expecting, a lot of players at your locals to start adopting those cards, then it might be a good idea to put these into your deck. Otherwise, if your locals has a lot of monster-based decks, like Drytron or say like Adamantipator or something, then you can just replace these with like Dark Ruler no more. But that's it for the main deck. Now going into the extra deck, first we have Triple Monk of the Tenyi. Very important, you play this at 3, you run through these extremely quickly during your Tenyi combos, and the third one will come up pretty often. Then you run one shot of the Tenyi. Very important to extend your plays through your opponent's disruptions by reborning a Moye or a Taya. And if you're later in the game, you can also bring back one of your big Swordsoul synchros. Just note that if you do use that effect, you will be locked into only using Tenyi monster effects if they're summoned from the extra deck. Then we have one generic Link monster, Lina. So Lina is a pretty good option that incidentally synergizes with the deck because when she's destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can search your deck for a light monster with 1500 or less defense, and that coincidentally fits with the description of Incredible Ecclesia. So this used to be played in a combo with Nibiru, where if you nibbed your opponent, you can summon any Tenyi, and then link the Tenyi and the Nibiru on your side into Lina, crash your Lina into your opponent's Nibiru token, and then search your deck for Incredible Ecclesia, which you can then special summon from your hand. So Lina is just a very good option. You can replace her with any Charmer, depending on what your local meta plays. For level 7 synchros, we play one Yazi. Yazi is just a very strong option for removal. The non-targeting part is also very strong against like any kind of back row deck, like Sky Striker. And if you decide to end up upgrading your deck by putting in something, say like the Bystials being level 6 and Adhara being a level 1, means that you have very easy access into Yazi. So very good level 7 synchro option. Then for the level 8 synchro options, we play one Adamantipator Risen Dragite, 2 Boxia, and then 2 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chixiao. So Dragite is in here as a replacement for Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. If you wanted to upgrade this deck, the very first thing I would recommend you upgrade would be replacing this Dragite with Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. Draco Berserker is just a very nice option because it's a level 8 worm synchro. A lot of times in this deck, you'll find that you lock yourself into summoning only worm monsters, and Dragite being a rock sometimes just doesn't work. But since we're on a budget, he's the next best option after Draco Berserker. And then double Boxia, very important. Very important to note also that Boxia is not a once per turn. So you can very easily summon 2 of these in a turn, and then shuffle away 4 of your opponent's cards, which is very impactful and lets you break through a lot of boards without triggering any kind of graveyard effect or destruction effect. So very important you play 2 of these. And then for Chixiao, not too much to say about him. He's one of your primary boss monsters to end on, and he lets you extend through a lot of disruption, so very good card. For level 9 synchros, we play one Chaofeng. So Chaofeng is, you don't go into this that often, but if you know your opponent is on some kind of light deck, so let's say Exo Sister or Drytron or Mathmech, you can make Chaofeng, and if they don't have an answer to Chaofeng right away, Chaofeng could just straight up win you the game. So it's still a nice option to have in case you run into decks like that, but you won't make him too often. And then lastly, for your level 10 synchros, we run 1 Qixing Longyuan, 1 Chengying, and then 1 Ruddy Rose Dragon. So Ruddy Rose Dragon is here as a replacement for Baron de Fleur. Obviously, we don't have the budget for Baron de Fleur. She's around $70 to $75 right now. If you're trying to take this deck competitive, then the next thing after replacing Dragite with Draco Berserker would be replacing Ruddy Rose Dragon with a Baron de Fleur. But for our purposes, Ruddy Rose Dragon works fine, especially in this current meta, where because it's so tier limit dominated and Nibiru isn't very good against tier, not a lot of decks are running Nibiru right now, and the most important purpose of Baron was to protect you against Nibiru. So since Nibiru isn't that popular, not running Baron isn't as big of a deal in this meta. And then lastly, these two are your Swordsoul boss monsters. Usually you summon Qixing Longyuan on your first turn and then Chengying to close out games. Both are very powerful, and the most interesting part about this extra deck is that everything in here is extremely cheap, under $1. Surprisingly, the most expensive part of this extra deck is your Monk of the Tenyis, which are $2 for some reason. But like I said, you do really want to play 3, so that's a pretty necessary part of your deck. But anyway, that's the deck, and hope you enjoyed watching, and look forward to a Swordsoul combo video coming out later as well.